Good morning, I'm Diane Macedo. This morning on ABC News Live, parents, you could see a boost in your bank accounts as new expanded child tax credits roll out today. The monthly payments will be up to $250 per child and $300 for kids under 6 and will largely go out via direct deposit through December. They're considered advance payments ahead of the 2021 tax season, so if you end up making more money this year, it could mean you'll owe some of those credits back. To find out how much you qualify for, check out the Child Tax Credit Calculator on abcnews.com. Just fill out your filing status, number of dependents, and income, and it will show you what to expect. We're hearing new 911 calls from panicked residents racing to escape the deadly condo collapse in Surfside, Florida.
We think the roof collapsed in the building. A bunch of us are in the garage, but we cannot get out. So we're going back up the stairwell. The garage is inundated with water. We don't know where the water is coming from.
Half of the building collapsed. I was able to escape, but I'm outside in the parking lot. If the building comes down, it will come down on my head.
In the 3 weeks since the building collapsed, 97 victims have been found, the youngest just 1 year old. And dangerous storms tore through the country overnight with tornadoes touching down in the heartland and floodwaters in the west. Meanwhile, at least 68 large wildfires are now burning an area the size of Delaware. In Oregon, the bootleg fire has grown to an area nearly 7 times the size of San Francisco. Officials say it will likely burn until late fall. And COVID cases are on the rise as the Delta variant sweeps through the country. Hospitals say patients are coming in younger and sicker than before, and there are new concerns now about unvaccinated kids. The CDC is predicting an increase in nationwide hospital admissions over the next month. Whit Johnson has the latest.
This morning, the highly contagious Delta variant gripping the nation. Positive COVID cases across the country rising nearly 87% since mid-June. In Los Angeles, cases are up 500% over the past month. Cedars-Sinai Hospital reporting a 7-fold increase in COVID hospitalizations in 2 weeks. Health officials say the majority of those patients are unvaccinated 20 to 40-year-olds. The rapid rise of the Delta variant now putting an urgent focus on children, those under 12 still not eligible for a vaccine. Health officials in Utah, where there are no mandatory COVID protocols in place, saying they investigated outbreaks at 10 different summer camps in 1 week.
It's just perhaps a glimpse of what's to come for the school, or which, if that's the case, it's quite concerning. 7
children in Mississippi are being treated in ICUs, including 1 younger than a year old. 2 of the children on ventilators. Health experts say they are seeing more severe symptoms in children who test positive for the Delta variant.
I suspect that's probably because this Delta variant is imparting a little more severe illness in the pediatric population than those earlier strains that were circulating.
But for one family in Arkansas, a hopeful development. 13-year-old Kaya, hospitalized with COVID, is getting taken off a ventilator.
I have not heard my baby's voice since July 3rd at 6:30 in the morning, so I am very excited to hear her say, "Hi, Mom."
Back here in New York City, officials say more than 98% of those who were hospitalized or died from COVID this year were not fully vaccinated. Diane?
All right, wishing Kaya and all of those patients a speedy recovery. And the Surgeon General is warning Americans about the, quote, urgent threat of health misinformation amid stalling vaccination rates. The advisory says misinformation has prolonged the pandemic and put lives at risk by sowing mistrust and causing people to reject public health measures. ABC News medical contributor Dr. John Brownstein joins me now for more on this. Dr. Brownstein, where's this misinformation coming from, and how much of vaccine hesitancy is fueled by that?
I think this is a very big deal. This is all taking place really on social media. We actually study misinformation almost like a virus. The same tools we use to track how a virus spreads from person to person. Well, rumors spread very similarly. And if you look at social media, you'll see how all this misinformation, all these rumors really can create mistrust and really push back against vaccine efforts. And so this is why the Surgeon General, with his first advisory, it really makes you recognize how big a deal this is, that these rumors flourish flourish in various populations. Of course, there's reasonable mistrust of the government, and especially when you look at racial disparities, but there's also political divide. And so this advisory is really pushing us to think about the conversation. It's public health. We're not that great about using technology and social media to engage in these conversations, but that's where we need to be. Health professionals and organizations need to be taking to these environments to have those conversations. And the technology platforms really have to take some responsibility here as well and really do a better job of dealing with all this misinformation that is happening in these environments.
In the meantime, what can people at home do to try to ensure that they're not taken by some of this misinformation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, yes, we're bombarded with information. I mean, really, you have to recognize who is sending you this information. Is it, a colleague or family member? Do they really have all the information to make these kind of judgments? This is why it's so important to talk to your primary care provider, your family physician. There's so much good science out there. I understand it's hard to triage, but you really have to go to, trusted individuals that are thinking about the science rather than, maybe someone who's just spouting off, misinformation. So hard to deal with. And I hope with this advisory, they're going to do a better job of giving the tools to organizations, to health professionals to counter all this misinformation.
And we've talked about how the Delta variant seems to be affecting younger populations more than previous strains of COVID. Now 7 children in Mississippi are being treated in ICUs. How concerning is that?
Well, I mean, I'm at a pediatric hospital, Boston Children's, and, this is concerning anytime you have kids in the ICU. We've always had this concern about kids and COVID. Yes, they do not deal with the same impacts as adults, but they have risk. There are 2 kids in Mississippi on ventilators. We don't know about underlying conditions, but this just tells you that, this virus is spreading through the state, unmitigated in many cases because of low vaccination rates. We know the Delta variant is incredibly transmissible. We don't know if it's more deadly or more severe in any age groups, but as long as you have this virus that's spreading so quickly, you're going to unfortunately have kids that get sick. And so this is why it's so important for the adults around them to be vaccinated, especially the younger kids who don't have access to the vaccine. And kids need to be taking those extra precautions, especially masking indoors, especially as you have Delta surging.
And so how might the Delta variant affect plans for children to go back to school in the fall, especially in areas with low vaccination rates? Could we see policies change and plans change?
I think this is a big open question. We saw that CDC came out with some guidance around schools. What they said is, it's not a one size fits all. It's going to really change depending on what's happening with Delta variant in a community. And this is why, of course, masking may be different depending on, of course, if you're vaccinated or underlying cases. We have to look at what's happening in the community to make decisions about what happens in schools, as we said all along. And this is, social distancing, masking, improved ventilation, testing. But in a state like Vermont that has really low case rates, kids are going to be able to have a more normal school year with less layers of protection. But in states like Mississippi and Arkansas, if you have this, spread, and we know that there's some level of risk to our kids, they're going to have, more interventions in play to keep those kids safe in school.
There's also a back and forth in Tennessee now over whether the state health commissioner ordered officials there not to acknowledge that August is National Immunization Awareness Month, as they usually do, as they have in the past. Now, just 38% of the state's population has been fully vaccinated. That's far below the rest of the country. I just wonder, how much do outreach campaigns like this really matter?
I mean, they're huge. I mean, this has been the name of the game now that we've done away with these mass vaccination sites. Now it's the ground game to educate people about the importance of this vaccine. And so outreach at the community level is everything that we want to be doing. So what we're hearing out of Tennessee is really surreal, to be honest. It goes against what we think about from a public health perspective. Just as cases are really rising, we know that Tennessee is really lagging in terms of vaccination uptake. So I personally feel it's a bit of a failure on the part of the people of Tennessee, right? Public health needs to be encouraging vaccination in every way possible. And we know that teens who don't get vaccinated are at greater risk of hospitalization and death. So I really think they need to reconsider how they're thinking about educating the public about not only COVID, but actually the broad range of vaccines that are so important for our kids.
And we should say that the Tennessee Health Commissioner is now pushing back, saying they do intend to acknowledge that August is National Immunization Awareness Month. ABC News medical contributor Dr. John Brownstein, we appreciate your analysis as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And a new Inspector General report says the FBI mishandled allegations of sexual abuse against former USA Gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar. Last night, the FBI issued a statement admitting that the handling of the case was, quote, appalling. Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas has more.
Overnight, a stunning report slamming the FBI for their handling of the allegations against Dr. Larry Nassar.
I've just signed your death warrant.
Nassar was sentenced to up to 175 years in prison in 2018 for molesting hundreds, including some of the nation's most well-known Olympians, Simone Biles, Michaela Moroney, and Ali Raisman.
I hope that the abuse will end with us. I hope that people can learn from what happened to us, that this should never, ever happen again.
The new probe from the Justice Department's Inspector General revealing that FBI agents failed to respond with the urgency that the allegations required and failed to mitigate the ongoing threat posed by Nassar. According to the report, the FBI first heard the allegations against Nassar in July 2015, but for months, agents did not flag authorities who could have taken action. That delay leading to questions about whether as many as 70 athletes were assaulted as the FBI fumbled their investigation into Nassar. The report also found as the controversy blew up, some FBI officials engaged in a cover-up, providing misleading information to make it appear that they took the allegations seriously. Diane?
All right, Pierre Thomas, thanks for that. And Americans trying to get a passport are facing huge delays as the State Department reports a backlog of up to 2 million applications. The State Department says the U.S. Postal Service is also part of the problem. Transportation correspondent Gio Benitez is at Newark Airport with more.
This morning, a massive backlog of passport applications, as many as 2 million, keeping Americans hoping to travel grounded.
Our call center is experiencing just unprecedented call volume.
The State Department's 26 passport agencies across the country are overwhelmed.
It's been about 2.5 months now, and the expected time frame for it was supposed to be 4 to 6 weeks.
Connor Jordan is especially desperate. In just over a week, he's scheduled to go on his honeymoon, but needs a new passport. To make matters worse, he can't get a refund on his hotel.
We've been looking forward to this for a very long time, put a lot of money and effort into planning this. There's a very solid chance that we are not going to be able to make it to our honeymoon.
Congressman Mike McCall is one of 2 lawmakers who sent a letter to the State Department this week urging faster processing times.
The State Department needs to go back to work in person because that's the only way they can process these passports. I do think they have to hire additional staff.
The State Department blaming, in part, the U.S. Postal Service, saying mail delays mean it can take up to 6 weeks to receive an application or send out a new passport.
We are working just as expeditiously as we possibly can, knowing that the traveling public has legitimate interests in travel.
The agency now warning this morning against scammers who purport to sell passport appointments.
We are working to prevent them.
A passport appointment does not require a fee, and the agency does not work with third-party booking sites. You also won't get your passport any faster that way. The State Department says you should apply directly by mail.
But just know it can take as long as 18 weeks to get that passport back. So just grab that passport, look at the expiration date. Even if you aren't traveling right now, if you're getting close to that date, just go ahead and start the process right now because it's clearly going to take a while. Diane?
All right, Gio Benitez at Newark Airport. Thanks, Gio. And a judge has granted Britney Spears a request to hire her own attorney in her conservatorship case. Now the pop star is calling for her father to be charged. When we come back, her emotional new testimony and her message to fans overnight. Welcome back. Britney Spears has a new advocate in her corner after a judge granted her request to hire her own attorney. Spears appeared in court giving another emotional testimony, describing what she calls the cruelty of her conservatorship, adding she doesn't just want her father removed as her conservator, she wants to press charges against him. Kaylee Hartung has the latest from Los Angeles.
Britney Spears back in court, now saying she wants her father, Jamie, charged with conservatorship abuse, telling a judge, investigate him. The 39-year-old who called into the hearing forcefully saying, I am here to get rid of my dad, and pleading through tears, my dad needs to be removed today. Asking the judge for the second time in less than a month to end the conservatorship that's run her life for the last 13 years, without any further medical evaluation, saying she does not want people to question my intelligence for the millionth time. Spears describing how she was at times forced to work 70-hour weeks while under the conservatorship, saying, I thought they were trying to kill me. She says she was denied coffee, hair vitamins, even had her driver's license taken away from her, saying that's not abuse, that's just cruelty. In court Wednesday, Jamie refusing to step down from his role as conservator of her estate, managing her estimated $60 million fortune. His attorney saying the star made a lot of misstatements, whether it's misinformation, lack of correction, or being wrongly advised. I don't know. But in a win for Britney, the judge granting her request to have former federal prosecutor Matthew Rosengart, who's previously represented stars like Sean Penn and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, take over as her attorney.
Now, are you sure you want a piece of me?
One thing that everybody has lost sight of is what is in the best interest of Britney Spears. We will be moving promptly and aggressively for his removal. The question remains, why is he involved? He should step down voluntarily, as that is in the best interest of Britney Spears.
Overnight, Spears posting this video on Instagram, writing, coming along, folks, coming along. You have no idea what it means to me to be supported by such awesome fans. This is me celebrating by horseback riding and doing cartwheels today, and using for the first time that now infamous hashtag, Free Britney. And Diane, putting this new attorney, Matthew Rosengart, in place, it's critical for Britney to move this case forward. And he was met with cheers as he left the courthouse. He did attend the hearing in person. Members of the Free Britney movement were waiting outside there for him. Like we said, this was a win for Britney. But make no mistake, Britney wants this conservatorship to end, though she said she's comfortable with Jody Montgomery, her conservator of person, staying in that role as this long process plays out. But what she wants right now is her father gone. Diane.
All right, Kaylee Hartung, thanks for that. And let's dig in a little deeper now. For more on this, I'd like to bring in family attorney and former psychologist David Glass. David, thanks for being here. You were actually one of only 10 members of the public in the courtroom yesterday for this hearing. So give us a rundown. What did you see?
Well, it was a relatively wild and hot hearing. The courtroom was packed. The air conditioner wasn't really working very well. And the first big movement by the court was to appoint Britney's new attorney. And that's a huge win for her. She feels like she has her own advocate, and she's going to have her own plan for getting out of this conservatorship. But from that point, the hearing relatively went downhill into what one attorney described as lawyers gone wild.
And explain, why was that description used? What happened in the courtroom?
Well, what happened was the attorney for the conservator of the estate for Jamie and the attorney for the conservator of the person, Jody Montgomery, they were lobbing accusations back and forth, with one saying that Jamie Spears is the cause of all the problems, and Jamie's attorney trying to explain that the things that Britney's complaining about, her medical treatment, her psychological treatment, her lack of having hair vitamins, all those things are the things that the conservator of the person decides. So they were lobbing accusations back and forth until finally the court said that everyone needed to figure out how to get along and to work more collaboratively.
So now Britney said that she wants her dad investigated and charged, but last month Jamie Spears said he would like the court to investigate her claims. Also, as you point out, most of Britney's complaints in court have been related to decisions that are generally made by the conservator of the person, not Jamie Spears, who only controls her finances. And yet, as Kaylee points out, she said in court that she's actually okay with Jody Montgomery staying on as her conservator of the person, but she wants her father out immediately. What do you make of all of that?
There's a lot of confusion on Britney's side. I'm glad that she has her own attorney and that she's going to work closely with this attorney and his team. But it appears that Britney has a lot of misinformation, is not remembering maybe some of the events correctly, and is in a relatively immature way trying to blame her whole predicament on her father, ignoring, at least for the moment, that he was the person who stepped in when she needed help the most. and that in the last 13 years, he helped grow her estate from less than $3 million under his control to over $60 million under his control, which is a relatively remarkable thing for any sort of person handling an estate with money.
Yeah, I mean, the money looks good, that's for sure. But we also heard from Britney that she's saying she was forced to work 7 days a week and you know, these huge amount of hours a day, forced to work against her will, et cetera. So I just wonder, when you balance those two things, we also haven't heard from Jamie Spears in court yet. He hasn't been able to speak in his own defense just yet. And Jody Montgomery hasn't been questioned in court. So how do you think we're going to see this whole aspect of the case evolve? And what do you think the chances are that Jamie's removed and that he maybe faces legal repercussions here?
You know, Diane, up until yesterday's hearing, I was doubtful that Jamie would be removed, but it feels like public opinion is clearly turned against him. Most of the attorneys in presence have turned against him. And he was asked a direct question by Britney's new attorney, how come you haven't voluntarily resigned? Everyone seems to have a problem with you, and yet you're still here. And thinking back to my time as a therapist, sometimes when family members try to get involved in helping a daughter or a brother or an uncle or aunt to get better, sometimes they merely need to step back and let someone else step in to try and help that family member because they've done all that they can do. And that's where I think this case is moving very rapidly, that Jamie is going to need to either resign or the court's going to have to take very seriously Britney's request to have him removed in order for the case to move forward. Ultimately, what Britney wants is for the whole conservatorship to be taken away.
And now you've now heard Britney on 2 occasions in the last 3 weeks. As both an attorney and a former psychologist, what did you think of her testimony?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think Britney is helping herself with her own testimony. In particular, yesterday in the hearing, she first asked that her testimony be sealed. And when her attorney stepped up to argue to the court why the courtroom should be cleared so no one would hear her testimony, she interrupted him and said she wanted to speak anyway. And so going forward, Britney really needs to work with her attorney and his team of attorneys and publicity people and media people to figure out what her strategy is going to be. I've worked with clients and I've explained to them in rather glib terms that if a judge tells you to burn your slippers and march around the courtroom backwards 3 times, that's what you do, because the judge is the person who's going to ultimately decide how your case is decided. And she needs to start listening to her attorneys to figure out how to present her case in the absolute best way.
All right. Family attorney and former psychologist David Glass, we appreciate your time, David. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And 75 years of Ebony magazine bringing Black stories to life. We'll help celebrate that anniversary with a little history lesson about how the magazine started when we come back. Welcome back. It's been 75 years since Ebony magazine first launched, becoming a trailblazing publication. So how did it all start, and what's next on the horizon? Take a look.
Ebony and Jet were founded by a brilliant man by the name of John H. Johnson. And in 1945, he launched Ebony. In 1951, he launched Jet. And you have to understand that at the time, Black stories were not told. He wanted to show the world that Black people were amazing. They were smart. They were to be respected. They had families that were doing well and progressive. His whole mission was to elevate the Black experience in pictures and words. In 1955, Jet magazine did something unheard of, and Mamie Till was behind this. She wanted the picture of her son, Emmett Till, to be on the cover of Jet. She had an open casket at that funeral, and Jet was there. They captured that image, but it was the boldness of John H. Johnson that said, yes, let's do it, and Mamie Till's courage in order to do that. And we've been putting people on covers for the last 75 years. We're going into our 76 years. There are so many iconic covers. Tracee Ellis Ross on the cover with Anthony Anderson, you know, that image of new Black Hollywood. Michelle and Barack Obama, Michael Jackson, Donna Summer, Aretha Franklin. We don't want to just cover what everyone else is covering. We also want to cover those folks that are invisible and haven't been seen, but have really made a true contribution to this community. In 2021, we are going to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Ebony magazine, which is now ebony.com. So what you're going to see Ebony refresh are a couple things. First thing, come on, HBCU Queens, we will bring back the Power 100 award show so that we can elevate and magnify the top 100 African Americans in the world. It's a place where they can learn and grow. It's a place where they can share. We really want to be the home for Black people to come on the web. Don't just love Black culture, but also love the Black people that create it. And when you support Black media, what you're doing is you're supporting the creators and the culture. And that is what is required. And that is what is going to be demanded of the marketplace.
And here's a look at this month's 75th anniversary cover featuring NBA All-Star Karl Anthony Towns. It's out right now. And that does it for this newscast. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for joining us. And remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern for the breakdown. Stay safe, everybody.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh, no, no, no. I'm a rocket man. Rocket man.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.